Have you been affected by the formula shortage and are trying to figure out what your options are in order to get your baby the formula that they need? I have my number one recommended formula go-to, which is European formula. It's what I used, honestly, before there was even a formula shortage for my baby when I was struggling with my low milk supply. It is what I had to supplement with, and I am going to outline why this is such an awesome option, no matter whether or not you are trying to find formula locally. This is really, I think, the top of the top in terms of quality, in terms of nutrition, and just all the different things that can go into a European formula. And no, it's not just because they're European. There's actually real logic and reasoning as to why these formulas are top tier. So I'm going to dive into those, and hopefully you'll be more at ease and rest assured against people who say that you maybe want to try and still shop within the US during this formula shortage. First off, the formula in Europe comes in stages. Most of the brands will have different stages for different ages for your baby. Now, I don't know whose idea was to think that we could do a one-size-fits-all approach to formula when it comes to feeding a baby. If you think about it, what they need as newborns versus what they need when they're 9 months old is very different. Their nutritional needs and the just quantity of the nutrient profile of all the different macronutrients and micronutrients varies. So these stages are custom tailored to what your baby would need as they grow. And so it's something that evolves with them. And the EU has actually standards for each of these age ranges to begin with. So you know that they are taking into consideration what your baby needs, okay? The next pushback that is often highly debated is the iron within the formula, okay? Here's where we are going to make a couple references. The FDA requires 0.15 to 3.3 micrograms of iron for every 100 kcal, okay, in the formula. European Commission requires 0.3 to 1.3 micrograms for every 100 kcal for any formula for the 0 to 6 month range. Remember, their stages. So they have their own that comes with the older stages as well, that the requirements. But I just want to point out that technically the European Commission standards falls within the FDA standards. It just doesn't go as high. Okay, so the approach that more is better in the American formulas in terms of how much iron is in there isn't necessarily required. Because if we now go back to thinking, what is formula designed to mimic? It's designed to mimic breast milk, right? So let's look at first what the iron content is in breast milk and then decide whether it's an appropriate range. Breast milk is anywhere, and this varies because everyone's breast milk is different, but every person is roughly in the range of 0.2 to 0.9 micrograms per liter. Now, of course, that doesn't 100% translate to the calorie metric that we were comparing previously, but essentially it does sit a lot closer to that European Commission number, okay, that range. So the European Commission is making sure that your baby is getting enough iron. That would be also similar to what your baby would get with just being exclusively breastfed. And the reason that this is possible is because within the first 6 months of your baby being born, they actually have, they're born with these iron stores in their liver, and it's supposed to carry them for about those first 6 months, and that would appropriately time with when you would introduce solids to your baby. Solids can be introduced, roughly at the 6 month mark when your baby's showing signs that they're ready, and those iron stores have carried them through. And so when you go to introduce solids, it's highly recommended you do iron-rich foods to make up for the fact that there is low iron in either the breast milk or the formula, if you're using a European formula, and then the fact that their iron stores are now all used up. So it's not necessarily something that is required as high in volume for a baby who is breastfed. So therefore, it would make sense that it's not a critical thing. Now, of course, we want this to be something you would check with your doctor if your baby has any risk of being deficient in iron. And this is also important to note that this is for a healthy full-term baby. This is not just for any baby. So there's, of course, nuances with all of this. But the iron that is in breast milk is pretty much on par to what the European Commission standards are. And that to me would be sufficient, considering there's so many babies who are able to be exclusively breastfed and don't need iron supplementation. So the other thing I want to now address is the sugar and lactose requirements. The European Commission requires a lot stricter regulations around this. So the amount of sucrose and sugar and just honestly junk that can go into some of the American formulas, and it's amazing what they can get away with, that's really regulated and minimized to the fullest extent. There's a few exceptions of how much sucrose can be in certain milks, formulas, but there are other formulas that it's not allowed for at all. So it depends on the formula itself and why it's being formulated that way. So there's, like I said, just how we have like certain types of formulas here that are more for the sensitive, or more the soy based, like all those kinds of things can have different needs. So there are some that allow for sucrose in the European formulas, but otherwise it's pretty much non-existent. And then the lactose requirements, which is actually really important for your baby. There's very few babies that are actually lactose intolerant, despite what some people say. There's a lot of lactose in breast milk, more than there is actually in cow's milk. So if your baby can do breast milk, they can more likely do cow's milk formula. If there's something going on with the cow's milk formula in your baby and they're not responding well to it, it's likely not the lactose. But nonetheless, the EU has a lot of regulations surrounding these kind of nutrients, where here in America we don't. And like I said, it's either going to be making sure that there's a certain minimum requirement or excluding some of these really like terrible ingredients for your baby. So there's that. Then we also, like I said, we want formula. Formula was designed to mimic breast milk. I personally had my son on, I'll say the brand was Enfamil, and that wasn't because I chose it. It was what was given to me when we found out we had to supplement. And he didn't respond well to it. It was thick. It was absolutely terrible. It made him spit up all the time, large volumes. And when I realized that we were going to be on formula a little longer than I had hoped, because I was wanting to increase my supply, I wanted to get to exclusively breastfeeding, when that didn't happen, I was like, all right, I'm going to take matters in my own hands. If I'm going to be feeding my baby a formula, I want this to be something that I am comfortable with and something that I know that I have done my research on and I feel better about than giving him, Enfamil. So that's when I went through and I picked up our European formula that we used. And when I mixed that, the consistency of the formula was so night and day compared to Enfamil. It was thin, like breast milk, right? And we don't want thick milk that sits in your baby's stomach longer. It can minimize how often they have hunger cues and just really diminish that response. And then there's, the fact that it's a lot harder for them to digest and break down, and they're itty bitty babies. They don't need any more work on them, especially if your baby is having any underlying conditions or difficulties. Then usually something that makes it harder for them to digest is going to add more work and burn more calories and all of that. So we just want to minimize the extra unnecessary stress on their bodies that goes into that. So I love the fact that the European formula was thinner in terms of the consistency for the formula. Organic standards are higher in the EU compared to here in the US. You would be surprised, even though it says the organic label on it, there are still certain pesticides and fertilizers and things that can get past that organic label and are allowed within organic foods that you would expect to not be in there. But nonetheless, it is what it is. But it's one of those things where the formula in Europe, and not just formula, but honestly all organic things, tend to be of a higher quality, higher caliber. Also, just know that the farming practices are usually much more sustainable, much more cleaner, and just all around better compared to the practices that we have here in the US in terms of what is allowed to be classified as organic. So knowing that, and knowing that the ingredients that go into your baby's formula are coming from a better source, you can be assured that the quality is going to be better and higher in just all regards. I also find that the FDA is a big reason why we are really pushing for moms to get American formulas. And it's them and then the American Academy of Pediatrics. I am not a doctor. this is not medical advice. This is just my own research. But because I'm not a doctor, I also am not a part of any type of board or institution where I am actually forced to follow their guidelines and tell you the stuff that they're being fed. So, not saying that doctors don't have actual knowledgeable and important, things that may be very significant for your baby or your circumstances. It's just, there's an agenda sometimes. And just like with the pharmaceutical industry, formula is a very big, almost like oligarchy in terms of how many companies there are, how many reps that they have working for them, and just all of the different components that it just gets a little questionable in the ethics. And so that's specifically for here in the US. So it's just one of those things where I don't think that we should ignore the FDA. It's important to acknowledge that some standards are better than none, right? We want to have regulations, we want to have certain sanitary practices, but we can't act like other countries who are also first world countries that, this isn't the 1900s anymore. This is something where we are looking at other countries who are on par with the US, who also have high regulations and standards for their people, that they're not inferior to American standards. And it'd be different. We were looking at formula from like second and third world countries maybe, or things of that nature. But there's absolutely no reason why the European formulas cannot stand on par with American formulas in terms of safety and regulations. So that is something I wanted to address as well. And then I want to point you to the one place that I would always buy my formula from, because where you buy and source it is really important, because you don't want it to have poor storage, poor, shipping and warehouse distribution. It can get kind of a little concerning when you have all of these different moving pieces and you don't really know how long your formula's been sitting in a shelf or in a warehouse, and it really can make a difference on how fresh it is, if it's past its expiration date, things like that. So I would order it from a distributor called Formuland, and I'm on their website right now. And here they have on their homepage, they address that not only do they do free shipping, but they have fast shipping. So if at any point you need to have your formula like stat, I found that they were always super on it, and I would get it within a day or two of ordering. So the free shipping, there is a minimum purchase order, and then for the fast shipping, it's next business day. So that is super helpful when we are dealing with a shortage. And then I want to also point out that on their website, they have a comparison chart. If you want to go and check out the different formulas they have, it gives you an outline of the different ones that you can compare, since, if you aren't used to European formulas, you're not really sure where to start or what to get. They have a chart on here that you can reference, and it is super helpful for anybody if you're looking for certain criteria or certain conditions that you need this formula to meet. They got it here outlined for you, so it's super easy to find. And then I found the price, which is another pushback that people claim is a big reason why you shouldn't do European formula, is that the price is so expensive. Well, let's be honest. Formula is expensive no matter where you get it from. Unless you're on some type of subsidized program or some sort of assistance, there is really no cheap formula out there. And so if you were to compare it to the cost of formula here, I found, for it being not only from Europe, but being organic, that the price was only a couple bucks more than what I was paying for here locally. And so that was one of the things that, to me, I was very shocked at and found super, relieving to see that, like, okay, I can actually still afford this one, just I would be able to afford the one that I'm getting here. So this is something that I would absolutely look into. This is formuland.com, and they have all of their formulas outlined on here. You can go ahead and check them out, explore, find the one that's best for you. And the one thing that I found that was really cool and awesome about this distributor is the fact that they have a rewards system. So essentially with every purchase you make, you earn points, and those points you can actually take on money off of your next order, and you can utilize the points as they allow. So that is one of the perks, I would say, to also using this website, is that over time you know, you can take a few bucks here and there off of your order. I personally would always order with about a month's supply. Of course, if you're just trying a formula, first make sure it sits well with your baby. But once you find one that works for you, I'd recommend getting it a month's supply, so that way, even if there is an import delay or something happens where there is a, you know, the order gets backed up because it is coming from overseas, I would always just order about a month's supply in advance and then always have that in stock until we were low again. So that's one of the tips I would say, also to make sure that you are at peace with making sure that your formula is always in stock, since you are dealing with an overseas distributor. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. I would love to know which formula you are looking at, and I will, you know, be able to answer any of the questions that you have towards those. But again, they have a comparison chart on their website, so make sure you check that out as well. If you like this video, make sure you like, subscribe, and then comment.